So the churches along the Ponce corridor just started closing one after another. But Druid Hills Baptist, now the church at Ponce and Highland, didn't close. We persevered through all of it.
We don't just, oh no, oh now, too bad, that's over. We find new ways, you're right. And I'm sure that's what the next 69 years are going to be. We can't even imagine what it's going to be.
Our churches changed with the times.
Druid Hills, as it was when I was growing up, has always been on the cutting edge.
When you walk through our doors, everybody is welcome. Nobody's excluded. We don't say you have to wear a coat and tie. You have to wear a hat on your head or anything. You come as you are. If you want to wear flip-flops, you wear flip-flops.
We value every person's worth, and I think that will continue.
Ours is a doing church. We actually get out there and use both feet and step right in it and do what needs to be done.
When I started, we came and listened. But now I think when you come to our church, you come to learn, you come to use your talents, you learn to find an avenue of service.
We have adapted, and we're going to be around another 100+ years.
We can survive, we can thrive through any situation.
I can go around the corner and find the Baptist church, but my history is with Druid Hills, now the church at Ponce and Highland, and I love that church, and that is my church and will always be my church.
I'm Shirley Ford Baskin. I joined the church in 1942 when I moved to Atlanta. I was in the junior department, and I've been at that church since all that time. As I grew up, I went through the intermediate department, which I met my husband to be. The only time I was away was when I was at college, and when my husband was interned in New York and served 2 years in the Navy. But all of the time I've been through there, I started teaching when I was in college to the primaries, and then I went to the intermediate department, then I went to the young people's department, and then I was asked to start the first young married couples department by our pastor then. And then I taught a senior class. So I went sort of from cradle to the grave in teaching, but it's been a wonderful, wonderful time. I was married in the church. My children were baptized there. It means the world to me. Wilson?
We lived at 654 Barnett Street, and we didn't have a car. Mother had to sell Dad's car, she needed the money more than the car. She never learned how to drive. So we walked to the church. So that was 1952. Then 4 years later, at age 10, Dr. Newton baptized me at the church. And he was there for 40 years. He had quite a history there. And then I was honored to be called in 1990 to be a deacon at the church. So I've been in that capacity ever since. And as far as living, I lived in Atlanta up until I moved in 1994 to Loganville, but I still went to Druid Hills Baptist. Then I moved out here to Snellville in 2013. Still go to the church. It's only a 20-mile drive, so I'd drive if it was 100 miles.
My parents attended the church, but they weren't as active as I was. But we were within walking distance too until we moved to Decatur, and then I would still come in, but they then went to a nearer church there.
we were the first vacation Bible school in the Atlanta area. No other church had one at that time. And I wrote a few dates down here because I can't remember all these dates, but that was in 1923, the first vacation Bible school. And the first church-related day camp was in 1945. And the Baskin Family of the Year in 1962. That was wonderful.
We had Christian Home Week each year, which we celebrated. And they would pick a family, the church would pick a family to sort of be the representatives of that time. And so my husband was in practice by that time. And but we arranged to be there on Wednesday night. We had our Wednesday night dinners. And I have a picture of Dr. Newton kneeling down, talking to James, my son, who is 60 years old now, talking to him. And at the time, I just remember this is something very funny. James is a lawyer now, so he's gotten to be a little bit more vocal. But Dr. Newton asked him, he was kneeling down, and he said, James, what does your daddy do? And James said, he's an operator. Well, my husband was a surgeon, but James thought that that was what you did. If you operated, you were an operator. When Dr. Newton was here, he was such a figure. He was looked up to, he was called Mr. Baptist. And I think we as a church just sort of followed in his path of what he decided. He could get up on Sunday morning or Sunday evening, and if he wanted something done, some cause given to, he could say, Mr. So-and-so, would you like to be a part of that? Would you like to do this? And we all sort of followed him. So Jonathan Spencer came as the servant leader, which was, we were still being led, but not as this magnetic figure that we all just, we didn't worship him. I don't mean that, but we honored him so. And then I think the difference between Jonathan coming with that specific servant leadership really then gave the congregation more of a part in the leadership of the church.
And to piggyback on what you were saying about Dr. Newton, he had such a booming voice. Mm-hmm. If the sound system went off, you could still hear him all over the church. Mm-hmm. He had the deepest resonating voice, and he was such a figure at that time. I mean, the Plaza Theater right next door was showing X-rated movies. Well, Dr. Newton decided he wasn't going to allow that. So he stepped right up to the plate. And before we know it, he shut down that place for a while. They eventually came back, and they still show movies over there today.
Another thing I think about that one pastor brought was not just his impact, but John Baker's wife was very interested in drama. And we had many plays that our members were a part of, and they were really well done. And that's when we had the theater built in our downstairs area. And people would come in and buy tickets to come. They even put on Shadowlands, which was the story of C.S. Lewis. And we had the adults in it, the young people, and it was really very well done.
You will remember Mary Saunders, who was the first woman deacon back in 1969. Nobody else had a woman deacon, but she was called, and the church wanted her to become a deacon, and she became one. And at our church, we also had the international Sunday school class formed in 1982. And then one of our pastors, the children, would sit there with the parents, but let me see, which one was it? Dr. Mims started having a children's sermon where he would call them up and he would sit right there on those 2 steps and they'd get all around him. And he would have a little 10-minute session or so where he would preach to the children. And that was a nice thing too. I mean, I was not a child at the time, but I sure enjoyed watching it. Our church really started out, I think, in 1914 with Dr. McConnell. I was not around under him, but when Dr. Newton had his 40 years, we've had like 10 pastors over the year, and I've been with 9 of them, and Shirley would be in the 9 category too, I'm sure, because she was there when Dr. Newton was there. He was the second. Oh, yeah. When Harold's Wall was pastor, he felt a calling to do a ministry to a, what was it called, Shirley? Pastoral care. Pastoral care. So he stepped down to the associate, and the associate, Dr. Maddox, stepped up to the— No,
it was not.
Bob DeFore, you're right. Bob DeFore. Yep. I know I'm throwing too much history that'll bore people to death, but I think it's interesting that in our 107 years, we've only had like 10 pastors, and 9 and 10 were really Graham and Mimi. They were co-pastors, and then Mimi became the single pastor. Mm-hmm. So that's interesting that we've only had that few pastors in all those years.
Back in Dr. Newton's time, we had the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Judge Duckworth. We had the Warren family, Sewell family, Warren Sewell, who had a clothing company that was more than one place. We had Mrs. Candler, who lived across the street in the, it was the Briarcliff Hotel at that time, where Connie lives now. Yeah. We had some very, very prominent. We had Lon Duckworth, who was also a lawyer and a big person in the Democratic Party. And we've had, those people helped certainly with the financial support of the church too. But they were not prized above anyone else. They were part of the congregation. I think more than just coming and sitting back and listening to a good sermon. If you come to our church, you're going to be involved. You're going to find a way of serving, a way of learning. We have so many opportunities. When I started, we came and listened. But now I think when you come to our church, you come to learn, you come to use your talents, you learn to find an avenue of service that will satisfy you.
And when you walk through our doors, I mean, everybody is welcome. Nobody's excluded. We don't say you have to wear a coat and tie. You have to wear a hat on your head or anything. And you come as you are. If you want to wear flip-flops, you wear flip-flops.
I think we have the most beautiful church that I can remember. And I've been to a number of churches. I think the interior is, I love to come in and sit and just look at the cross above the above the baptismal. And I think that that has stayed. It has not gotten, we kept up the inside. We modified it, taking out, rearranging the altar area, and we've grown in that, but we have not lost the beauty of the church. And I know the church, we say, oh, the people of the church, and that's true, but the sanctuary itself, I think, is just one of the most beautiful in the city or anywhere that I've seen.
And speaking about the beauty of the church, I don't have it in front of me, but that book that Gene and Harry wrote point out different things around and what the history of it is. And we could look that up sometime and share some of that. But and then we have our organ. Oh my goodness. People that have been there know what good sound it has. And we had that great big long grand piano, it must be 14 or 15 feet long. And we have visitors coming every week, and they can join any of the committees. They can be on a mission and take trips down to Mexico. They can do something up here. And we've got the Mercy Church now where we feed people on Tuesdays and maybe even on Saturdays. But ours is a doing church. We actually get out there and use both feet and step right in and do what needs to be done.
It's not the size. You can adjust to whatever size that you have. You want more people to be involved, but it doesn't matter that if the size itself, it's what we come for, what we give in the way of our own talents, our own offerings, and we can survive, we can thrive through any situation that comes. In my growing up days, we had such large classes. We had 2 women's classes that probably had 50 members each. The men's Bible class was absolutely huge. They had the whole big downstairs area. And when I was an intermediate, we would go to Salem on retreats. We would go to Ridgecrest in the summer. And my husband, to be Hagan at that time, won the sword drill, which was finding verses in the Bible competitively. You had to be very fast and knowledgeable to do that. And you started at a local level and then went to the state and then went to the region. And he finally won at Ridgecrest. And then they asked him to speak at the Southern Baptist Convention after that. So we did some exciting things. We thought that was just the way everything should be. But now looking back, it was a very treasured time.
And I'm so thankful that I have known Shirley all these years. And she taught me when I was in the college career class and so on. The college career class, I guess when it was formed, she was the director of it and Hagan was teaching, and we had some other teachers along the way, but Shirley is one of those people that is gung-ho. I know I'll stop now, Shirley. She has shared her talents in more ways than one.
In the young college and career, and I tried to expose my young people to different foods and things like that. And I got on Facebook from Jane Watt. Wilson, you remember Jane Watt?
I remember her well, yes.
And she put on Facebook, and of course, that was, I don't know how many, 50 years ago, something like that. And she said, I remember how Shirley Baskin would fix quiche for us and on Sunday morning and give it to us. And we didn't know what it was. And she said she felt that she was giving her pearls to the swine because, but they all learned what quiche was because.
Up on the second floor, that's where it was. And there was a downstairs and an upstairs. And we had classes in both places. We had a lot of classes in those days.
Mm-hmm. We really trained our children. We were required to go to, training union on Sunday night. That was some of the best training, not just in Bible knowledge, but in getting up and giving your program to a bunch of your contemporaries who would just be giggling and laughing at you, and you couldn't use your quarterly. So you had to give your program. And now I'm going to give a talk to our little church out here Sunday, and people said, oh, you can talk before people. And I said, guys, I had such rigorous training in training you. Also, we had evening services then. Then one of us would have to go in the big church and give to the whole congregation what we had studied in our training union. So we not only had to speak before our contemporaries, but we had to speak in front of the whole church. And that was excellent training. When I was growing up, we had just 4 soloists. We had 2 women and 2 men, and they were the entire choir. And then we got a new couple, she was the organist and he was the music director. And we had our first choir then. And then we had a youth choir that traveled to Europe and all over, singing and putting on programs. And now we're back to a smaller choir. And so we've gone, but it's meaningful. The size does not matter. It can be a quartet, it can be a full choir, it can be 8 people up there, but it's the worship and the what everybody is feeling and enjoying. And I think that it can phase in and phase out of different areas. And it's not the number, just as the size of the congregation can go from big to small, but the purpose is still the same.
And we had a world famous organist that was with us for a while, Carlo Curry.
Mm-hmm.
And he traveled around the world and he was one of the best at his time. So And speaking about Druid Hills, though, there was a Druid Hills Baptist, a Druid Hills Methodist, a Druid Hills Presbyterian. People started moving out to the suburbs and they would attend church there. So the churches along the Ponce corridor just started closing one after another. But Druid Hills Baptist, now the church at Ponce and Highland, didn't close. We persevered through all of it. If we had 20 members to show up one Sunday, well, we had 20 members. But
yes, we have a book written about us. When you said steadfastly, that's the name of Jean Osborne Gibbs. Wrote the book with her husband Harry Shaw, and it's the history of the church. And I think I think the title is "And They Continued Steadfastly," or something to that effect.
You're 100% correct. That was the title.
That everything may change around it, but the integrity of the church goes on.
I have a copy of that book that Jean gave a personal message to me because I was in her Sunday school class. So, and her husband, Harry, was a journalist. So Jean wrote poems and gave them out every Christmas and Thanksgiving and Easter. It was in the 50s. I don't remember if it was 55, 56, but we built an activities building. We were just in the building that we're in now, but we built a separate building where, we could have a whole lot more going on. And we even had a bunch of Sunday school classes. I mean, back in the 50s, Shirley may help me remember this, but I think there was probably 3,000 plus members way back then.
Yes, that's right.
And then the neighborhood started changing and people decided to move out to the suburbs. And over the years, the attendance dropped. And I think it was Jonathan Spencer, when he left, we had a couple of visiting people, temporary pastors and all. And then Mimi and Graham came, I think around maybe 2008. It's hard to remember the exact date. And they were co-pastors, husband and wife co-pastors. And we had never had anything like that before. But eventually, I think it was around 2011, Graham wanted to spend a little bit more time possibly with his teaching, and Mimi was called to be the senior pastor. So see, she's been that for about 10 years now. But you mentioned no longer being affiliated with the Southern Baptist. That's an interesting story because they for some reason only want men pastors. They haven't, got up to the present time yet. So anyhow, we insisted that we wanted Mimi to come as the full-time pastor. Senior pastor is what they call her. And the consequence was we were dismissed from the Southern Baptist Convention.
Well,
the word's not excommunicated, but we were let go, and they didn't want any of our offerings anymore. I think that's interesting.
Well, I think Druid Hills, as it was when I was growing up, has always been on the cutting edge, that we didn't have to just follow what the rest of the churches were doing. As Wilson said, we had the first day camp, we had the first women pastors, we had the first young married couples, co-ed married couples class. I think we had the first library. We were sort of not just in the fold, more or less. We had our own identity, I think, all through the history. And so I think it's not a surprise that we've taken these stands just in the past 20 years.
Way back in, I guess, around 2015, somewhere along in there, we decided to rename the church at Ponce and Highland, so it would be more specific and people would know where Druid Hills Baptist is not in the area called Druid Hills, but so let's just let people know it's at Highland and Ponce Lynn. So I think that was a good thing. Mm-hmm. But I still have fond memories of the old name and the new name. 1990, when I was asked, would I consider being a deacon? And I thought, oh my goodness, that's such a responsibility. But, I thought about it and prayed over it, and I did become one. I was accepted. And I mean, that is just a wonderful thing to do. But
I have so many really sort of personal ones. Of course, being married in the church. And of course, at that time, we didn't have that wonderful social hall and educational building. And the what we call now the parlor was the only entertainment. And the church was filled at my wedding. And so you can imagine on an August night with no air conditioning, how this. And speaking of air conditioning, this is a great story. Dr. Newton, when we were talking about building an educational building, we had all been informed about it. And so on Sunday morning, we took a vote of whether we would commit ourselves to building this educational building. And we all, as I said, we depended on Dr. Newton. We all raised our hand. Dr. Newton looked up in the balcony and he said to Mr. What was his name? I'm gonna think of it. Anyway, he said, you didn't raise your hand up there, one person. And he got up. What was his name? I'll think of it in just a minute. And he got up and he said, I don't think we should even consider building a new building until we air condition this building we're in. Do you know? Everybody said, good idea. Why didn't we think of that? That we got air conditioning before we got that. And this was that one person could stand up and change Stockbridge, Daryl Stockbridge. His wife was my Sunday school teacher, but he said, Darren, why did you not stand up? But he saw one person not doing it. Yeah. And I think he did say, anybody opposed? And that's when Derek raised his hand and he said, why one person got the whole thing changed. So that's a good story.
And as far as me, I'd used 1952 as my starting point. And then Dr. Newton baptized me at age 10 in 1956. So I'm 75 now, so I've been there 69 years of my 75 years. And there's always an opportunity out there. I mean, if you're a deacon, fine, deacons do wonderful things, but there are people on the committees that do not choose to be a deacon. Missions, I mean, we were going to have a yard sale, and we'll still have it sometime in the near future, but people can donate their furniture and even give money if they want to. I mean, there's always a place for somebody if they want to step up to the plate. I mean, our church does things and all they need is somebody to be the hands and the feet to get it done.
Next year, it will be 70 years since I came as a child. And I felt that the church was so large that you really didn't feel like you were absolutely needed there. I mean, you came and you took what the church had, but you didn't feel that you always felt, oh, there's somebody better equipped and prepared than I am. Now I think we value every person's worth, and I think that will continue and become even more prominent in the planning of the church, bringing out the people to their potential of what that they can help them as Christians and what can help the church as a body also. And I think that is what it has changed from the minister and the staff more to now the people need to step forward. We find new ways. We don't just, oh no, oh now, too bad, you know, that's over. We find new ways, you're right. And I'm sure that's what the next 69 years are going to, we can't even imagine what it's going to be, but it will be in God's.
Yes, our church has changed with the times, no matter what it was, whether it was the 60s and 70s when we had the hippies around and, you know, different groups of people, and we have adapted, and we're going to be around another 100+ years. But I'm just so grateful to be a member of that church, and it's the only church I want to go to. I mean, I can go around the corner to a Baptist church, but I'm not going to do that. I love Druid Hills Baptist Church, and they meant a lot to me over the years. I can go around the corner and find the Baptist church, but my history is with Druid Hills, now the church at Ponce and Highland, and I love that church, and that is my church and will always be my church.